So we've built the edit house page, but it's using the house form, which right now only knows how to add a house. That's why it's talking all about adding a house when we want to be editing the house number 4 here. We also work through all the permissions on the front end so that it will only show me this page if I'm authenticated and if my user matches the house's user ID. So we're actually going to start on the back end here. We're going to go create a mutation to update an existing house. And then we'll work ourselves back to the front end to modify this form so that it can call the mutation that we're going to create. So in the code, we're going to go into src schema house. And it's pretty big now, there's a lot going on, but we're going to scroll down into the house resolver. And so right now we have 2 queries: find a single house, find many houses. We have a create house mutation, and we're going to be adding another mutation below here. So for this one, we definitely want to make sure that the user is authorized, and then we want to set it up so that it knows it's a mutation that's going to return something. So what is it returning? It's just returning a house. Nullable true, because it could fail, or you could try to get around it by not going through the front end and just calling our GraphQL for a house you don't own. We're going to check ownership in here as well so that there's no getting by us. So we need to declare the function itself. So this would be update house, and it's going to receive a whole bunch of arguments. So the first one it's going to receive is an arg called ID. So the variable is ID and the type is a string. So this is the house you're trying to update. Next, we're going to receive the input. So this is very much the exact same input we needed when creating a house. We're going to reuse that input type. So input is house input, like this. And then we need the context to both make sure that your user matches the house's user and to get access to Prisma. So context will give us the context variable, and we know it's an authorized context because of this here. So now we're into the body of the mutation. And the first thing we're going to do is just put the house's ID into a variable so that it's easier to use later on. So house ID we're going to parse int this thing, because this is coming to us as a string from the front end. So we're just going to parse this out, convert it into an integer so that we can easily load the existing house from the database. So that's the approach we're going to take. We're going to load the existing house and then we're going to update it, but we're only going to update it if the user matches correctly. So we're going to say const house is equal to get access to Prisma house find 1, because we just want to edit the one house, where the ID is equal to the house ID. And make sure that you await, because it gives you a promise back. So here what we can do is we can just check. We're basically checking if we should get out of this function because we can't continue. So if there's no house, if they passed up a bogus house ID, get out of here. And if the house.user ID is not equal to the context user ID, also get out of here. Get that garbage out of here. Boom. Okay. And it's freaking out a little bit. House is possibly null. Ah, that's because of this. Okay. So it actually should be an or. My logic was wrong. So if there's not a house or the user ID doesn't match, get out of here. And that fixed our TypeScript error as well. So at this point, we know we have a house, we know the user IDs match, and now we can just update its data. So we're going to return and await context prisma.house, oh boy, house, and we're going to use one we haven't used yet, the update. So update, we have to first tell it which house we're going to update. And even though we just loaded the house, that was purely for checking to make sure that it's all good. Instead, what we do here is sort of a combine where clause with the data that we want to update. So we say where the ID is equal to house ID, and here's the data we're going to update, and it's actually the same as this. So why don't we copy and paste it? data, but you can get rid of the user ID because we're not actually changing the user ID. You shouldn't, at least in this case, the user ID is staying the same. Now it wouldn't cause any harm because the value is going to be the same, but why keep code you don't actually need? So here's our mutation on the back end. We're going to first come here and I'm just going to refresh this playground purely because I know that is an easy way to get this schema updated so that later on, see we have the update house one in here now, so that later on when we do code gen, everything's in place and we're good there. Okay, so this is our update house mutation. We're going to close this and we're going to move into the house form and update it so that it can actually edit a house. So inside of SRC components, house form, we're going to scroll way up to the top and right below our two mutations, we're going to add the edit house mutation. Sorry, we're editing a house, but what's the mutation doing? It's updating. So that's what we're calling it. So this is the update house mutation and it is equal to GraphQL. And in here, we are going to call mutation. It's going to be the update house mutation. And what data is it going to receive? So it's going to receive an ID, which is a string. And it's also going to receive input, which is house input with a bang because it's required. Now let's call the mutation itself. So update house will give you all of the data from our variables. So that's the ID and the input. And we're going to ask for some info back. So really we only need the ID because we're going to redirect them back to the show page. But I'm actually going to ask for most of it. That's going to update the Apollo cache. It's smart enough to get a house back. Oh, I have that house in my cache. Here's some new info. I'm going to update it so that the first time the user sees the show page, it has all the latest data in it. So we've got the image, the public ID, the latitude, the longitude, the bedrooms, and the address. Just like that. Okay. Just double check something. That I did ask for the address. Just double checking. Yes, perfect. Okay. Let's keep going. So we've got the mutation set up. Now we're going to scroll down a little bit and see this interface iProps. On mine it's on line 81. Yours might not line up exactly. It's a little bit lonely, right? What are we doing? We're passing the house to this house form, as you can see on the edit page here. Scroll down. It's failing right now. We're passing it the house. So we need to go back and update the interface so that it receives the right thing. So it's receiving a house, but it's not always going to receive it because this form is being used for both edit and add. So you do that by saying it's an optional field with a question mark. And the type of data for this is iHouse. Doesn't exist. We're going to go define that right here above. So interface iHouse. Here's all the fields that we should expect a house to have in order to edit it. We are going to say that the ID is a string. Interface. There we go. I'm getting a lot of squiggles. Cannot find name. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, so the ID is a string. The address is a string. Latitude and longitude are both numbers. So below that, we've got the bedrooms, which is a number. We've got image as a string and public ID as a string. Perfect. So our props are set up here. We haven't received them yet, so we're going to receive the house right here. And the first thing we need to do inside of our house form, we're basically going to be working our way through it and modifying every single place where it should be different when you're adding versus editing. So this is a lot of refactoring and it's a little bit finicky, so try to follow along and I'll go slow. So the first thing we want to do is the form itself, when we set up the form with the use form hook, we have this default values here that we set up as empty. Now we actually will have default values when you're editing a house. So we're going to put a ternary here. So if there's a house, we're going to do some default values. Otherwise, we'll leave it as nothing. So here is when we do have a house. So we're going to set default values for the address, which is the house.address, the latitude, which is house.latitude, longitude, house.longitude, and the bedrooms should be house.bedrooms, but we just have to convert it into a string because that's the way our form is editing this input. Hit save. It's going to do some funky formatting, and now we step down in the form a little bit. So down here we had a create house mutation. Right below it we're going to set up the call to our update house mutation. So here would give us an update house function from use mutation, and this will be the update house mutation. Now we didn't pass the angly brackets yet because we have to go and run code gen first. So it's a good policy that as soon as you set up your mutation, you just run code gen right away so that you can go and apply the types as soon as you're going to use it. So this will just take a second, generate us the types. We can go up to the top now and actually uncomment this and copy and paste these variables. Now while you're here, why don't we just uncomment image as well, because that's the last one and we are going to be using it in this video. So we're using everything now. Scroll back down, scroll in slowly, and we're just going to paste those two type definitions, the interfaces, into our mutation setup so that it knows what it's going to be receiving. So now we have what may be the most complicated part. We've already built a handle create function for when we're adding a new house. We need to create sort of an equivalent handle update function. And if you thought this one was big, the update's a little bit bigger because it has to deal with sort of, am I using the old image or the new image sort of thing. But we'll work our way through it. So we're going to create a handle update function. It's going to be asynchronous, and it's going to receive the current house. So this will be typed with iHouse, the interface we set up above, and it's also going to receive the data from the form, which would be the iForm data, just like this. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up an image variable. So let image equals current house dot image. So this was just the URL that points, the secure URL that points to Cloudinary. And the reason we have this variable here is the user may not have changed the image. So this is sort of our default. If the user didn't change the image, you're going to keep the value the same. You're going to use the old image. Now we're going to work through some checks to see if they did change the image. So we're going to say data.image, if data.image, so we're going to check, did you include an image in this form data? If they did, that means that they want to upload a new image to Cloudinary and change it. So we have to do that now. So we're going to say const data as signature data is equal to await create signature. Now this is very much similar to the work we did up here, but I'm just going to retype it so that it stays fresh in our heads what we're doing. So if there's signature data, basically if we were able to create the timestamp and signature required to upload to Cloudinary, now we can go in, strip out that data into variables. So signature and timestamp is equal to signature data dot create image signature. like this. So now we have the signature and the timestamp. With that, we can upload our image to Cloudinary. So we're going to have a variable that has image data back, and we're going to await this image being uploaded to Cloudinary. So we're going to call the upload image function again. It's going to receive the actual image itself plus the signature and the timestamp. What this is going to give us back is the secure URL, and we're going to basically replace whatever was in this image variable with the image data.secure URL. So if we get to this point, this image will have the new URL for the updated image. So we've dealt with all the image stuff. Now we just have to call our update house mutation. So from a mutation, you get some data back. We're going to call this house data, just like this. And it is going to be awaiting a call to the update house mutation. So like any or most mutations, it receives variables. Now this received two variables. The first one was the ID. So that would be the current house.id, the one that we received up here in this function. And we also have the input. So the input contains all of the information from the form. Now this is actually the exact same as this up here for the create, but we're going to retype it because we're programmers. No, I don't know what that means. Of course we're programmers. We're doing this video. But anyways, we're just going to type it. Okay. Data.address. We've got the image itself. I know you don't have to type it twice, but I'm just going to do that for consistency with everything else. We've got the coordinates, which are the data.latitude, and the longitude is data.longitude. And then below coordinates, we have bedrooms, which we'll have to parse back into an integer, data.bedrooms 10. Oops, there we go. So I'm going to hit save. Our TypeScript errors here at least should go away. And now we're going to go down here. So what do we want to do if everything works, if we get the success response back? We're going to just redirect them back to the show page. So for that, we are going to say, if house data, the update house field is there, we are going to take the router and push them to the houses, and we can just say current house.id because the ID didn't change at all. When you update, you don't get a new ID, and that will send the user there. So this code was a little bit complicated, a little bit long, but hopefully it made sense what we're doing. We'll get a chance to test it in a second, and if there's any errors, we'll troubleshoot them. But now we're going to keep moving on in this form and making the changes required. So on submit, this gets called when the form submits. Right now it's only set up to handle create. So we need to set an if statement so that it either calls handle update or handle create. So if there is a house, that means we're going to call update. I'm just going to convert this into a Boolean by double banging that there. So if this is true, so if there's a house, we're going to call handle update. The function we just created above, it wants to receive the current house and the form data. Else, we'll move this handle create in here. Okay, just took a while for my TypeScript to fix itself. So that's all good now. Our on submit should handle both update and create. We're going to keep on moving and finish updating the more visual side of this form. So the first thing we're going to do is this H1 here, add a house. You're not always adding a house, so we're going to add a little ternary here. So if there's a house, we're going to say that you are editing the house.address, like that. Otherwise, you're adding a house and end the ternary like that. So if we were to come and look at the form now, nice. So you're editing 100 Richmond Street. We haven't worked on the rest of this yet, but we'll get there in a second. So the next thing we're going to do is fill in the default value for the search box. Right now it's always empty. What we're going to do is we're going to check again. So is there a house? If so, it's the house.address. Otherwise, there's no default value to the search box. Come back here. With the search box, you sometimes have to refresh because it's Google Places. It doesn't do hot module reload very well. But now we get this in here. So now let's move on to the image. We want to get this showing up correctly. See how it is showing the beds though? So that's good. Okay, so we don't have to change there, but we do have to change down here on the preview image. Okay, actually, we do have to change this input a little bit. We need to change the validate. Okay, so the one thing we need to change here and when we're validating the input of an image is that we have to say if there's a house or the file list has one file in it. Because you don't always have to change the image when you're editing a house. You can just stick with the old image and that's totally fine. So we updated the validation to say house or is equal to 1. Now we come down to this preview. Okay, so when there's a preview image, that means they're uploading a new image. So if that's the case, we always want to show this image here. But there's a case where we want to show the existing image. So we're going to update this logic a little bit. We're not going to use the short circuit operator. We're going to switch this to a ternary. So if preview image, show this one. Come down here, else, what we're going to do is we're going to check, okay, another ternary. Else, let's check to see if we have a house. If we have a house, we can show that house's existing image. If no house, null. Just going to save it so that it formats it. So your logic should look a little bit like this. So if there's a preview image, show that preview image. Otherwise, check to see if there's a house. If so, we're going to fill in the details of this house's image. Finally, if neither of those are true, we're going to show null. So on this image component now, we're just going to add all the necessary props, the 400,000 props that Cloudinary image component wants to receive. So a class name of margin top of 4 to space that out a little bit. Set the cloud name, process.env.next public Cloudinary cloud name. It's the longest variable ever. It needs the public ID to show correctly, so that would be the house.public_ID. Maybe we should set an alt tag. We can do house.address. Make sure it's a secure link. The DPR is auto. The quality is auto. We're going to make the width of this 576 to match the one above in the preview. So width is 576. Now we need to set the height. So this will be that same calculation we've been doing. It's 9 by 16 multiplied by 576. We're going to crop it to fill the space, and the gravity of that crop is going to be auto. So I'm going to save that, go back to the form. So now we're seeing an image, but it's the existing one. So let's say we were to upload a new one, which is a different one, that one. Now there's a preview image, so the preview image takes precedence because that's the new one that's going to be added. Okay, we're almost done actually. Scroll down a little bit in this form, keep scrolling. The last thing we're going to change is down here. Where do you go when you click cancel? Right now it's just taking you to the home page. We're going to put this into a variable so that we can say if there's a house, we're going to send you back to the page of the view of that same house. So house.id. Otherwise, we'll send you to the home page. So that's the last change there. So if we were to come back and click cancel, it shouldn't send us to the home page. It should send us here. Why don't we come in here and let's say we're going to change the bedrooms to 3. Save that. Perfect. It worked. We can go to our console here. We should see an update statement somewhere. There we go, update. So here's where it was updating the values of our house, and then it queried the house a couple more times when it got redirected back here to the show page. We can come and we can try changing the image. So what's an image I want? This nice country home. So let's do that one. Maybe this is at 150 Richmond Street, Toronto. There we go. Hit save on that. That one took a little bit longer because it was uploading the new image to Cloudinary, but it worked. So we're at 150 Richmond Street with this beautiful country home in the heart of downtown Toronto in this 3-bedroom house. So that was a crazy mouthful. It was a very long video. I'm sorry for that, but updating a house and modifying this form is probably the most complicated part of code in this entire application. What I recommend is, and what I've been doing for every single video, is I've been doing a commit with the number of this video. And if you want to make sure that your changes line up with mine, I'll include the reference to that commit below. So go and compare your code with mine. We changed these 4 files here. We had our generated file here for the update house mutation. Our schema got updated with the update house mutation call. We slightly tweaked this page, and then we spent most of our time, well, this is where we added the mutation itself, and then we spent most of our time in this house form. So go to GitHub, look through the diff, follow through the changes that we made in this video. Maybe you'll have to watch it again, but that's totally okay. And that's it. So next we're going to work on deleting a house, and then we're uploading it. We're deploying it. We've gotten to the point where our app is ready to expose to the public. All right, see you there.